Hey everyone, I hope you're all well. I thought I'd take a moment to talk to you about the leadership essay for HSP406. So, as per usual, I always like to try and explain what I'm doing with ridiculous little graphics. You can see here on the first slide of the slides I'm using for this presentation that I've got, some computers there. You need to do a bit of research for this project, and you'll need to be able to think about what the differences are between leadership and management, most importantly, and which theories you're going to focus on talking through your own leadership practice for the essay. So you're going to have to do a bit of research on both of those things and then read quite a bit about it in order to really understand those concerns before you can apply it to your own practice, which is the other little graphic that I've got here of people sitting in a room. And of course, once you've done all of those things, you're typing up your response. It's pretty straightforward. So I just do a quick reminder that this is part of the UTAS submitted assessment. It's the leadership essay and the critical analysis of policy essay. And then you've got 3 different types of assessment which are submitted in your residential component. So the due date of this assignment is up online on the Milo site for you. The word count is 2,000 words maximum, and that excludes your reference list. Not your references in text, but your reference list. And it's weighted at 40%. What you need to do is, first of all, discuss the difference between leadership and management, and then you need to think about your own leadership experience as an officer. And doing that, you need to identify and discuss 2 contemporary leadership theories and models, and I've just given you a few examples of contemporary ones like transformational, transactional, post-industrial, all of that sort of stuff, and I've got a lot of other examples in the information for you on the Milo site. And you need to talk about how these have informed your past leadership practice and how they've informed, most importantly, your practice as an ethical police practitioner in your organisation. And you need to draw on research literature. And to do this, you need to draw on research literature and set readings to inform your response. Now, in terms of the set readings, I'm not giving you specific readings about different types of theories. I've given you readings that overview a whole bunch of different leadership theories to give you a starting point so that you can read a little bit about it and then find your theories that you want and then jump off from there, just so you're aware. I've given you a suggested structure for this task because I like structure and I think it's really important for producing good outcomes in terms of a nice, well-written essay. You've got an introduction, which is about 200 words. It's about 1 paragraph, and you need to introduce the topic briefly, maybe in a couple of sentences, and provide a roadmap of what each section in your essay will discuss. From there, you need to sort of compare and contrast leadership and management. What does the research say about leadership and management? How are they similar? How are they different? And you can divide up your words depending on what you'd like to cover in sort of about 500 words, I suppose, and how you'd like to do that. From there, you need to talk about the 2 leadership theories or models and make reflective links to your own practice. And you could discuss this in a couple of different ways in about 1,000 words. So one person might talk about 2 theories first in a separate section and then follow this with a section talking about how this links to your practice, right? And having the references coming in to support, so you could say, well, this is clearly an example of how they talk about such and such in transformational leadership when you're actually talking about your own practice in those paragraphs. Other people might find the themes across both of the theories and then talk about each theme in a separate paragraph, noting how each theme then links back to their practice in that paragraph. So your practice becomes like the example of that theme where that theme is drawn from a leadership theory or model, if that makes sense. Then you've got a conclusion of about 200 words where you're summarising your main points and what you have found overall. And that could be a personal reflection on what you found, or it could be what it says in relation to the future of that model, for instance. And then you've got your list of references, which is excluded from your word count using Harvard style. But I'm happy if you want to write to me and say, look, I want to use a different referencing style. I just need it on file so I can tell my markers about that. Some general tips for this task for you. Using first person language is fine. One big tip I will give you is that there's many different models and theories of leadership. And the ones listed in the question in earlier slides are just a few. There's some others there that I've listed off. Some ways of talking about leadership are talked about in the research literature as a particular model or a particular theory. Other times it's talked about both a model and a theory, right? And some writers really can be a bit annoying because they use the word model and the word theory interchangeably in their discussion. So when you're doing your research literature search for your sources that you're going to use to support your ideas, make sure you use model and theory in your search terms, because then you'll get a whole range of different sources coming up. Read the wording of your question carefully. This is because sometimes you can have people that just talk about what the differences between leadership and management are and don't even talk about their practice. You're going to fail a whole section if you do that. So you've got to make sure that you've got all the bits. Also make sure you include specific discussion examples about your own practice, so the links that you make to the research are really, really clear. I would argue it's really important to think about how you define ethical, and that you should take the lead from your police organisation in this respect. How do they conceptualise this idea, and how can you then link that in with your discussion? So making sure that you've got some sort of definition would be really, really useful. Include at least one reference per paragraph, and there's always specific information in the marking rubric about how many references to include, and all of that sort of stuff to get out high distinction or a distinction, etc., etc. You can use a standard essay structure where you have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And I've got some further information about essay structure for the task in the slides below. Now, I always like to give students some information about common problems in past student essays for this assessment. A lot of people don't use enough research or literature to link to your reflective practice, right? Reflective practice becomes an analysis when you're writing about what you did and you are linking the theories and the literature with what you did. You know, you'd say, well, I did this thing, it was really useful, people gave me really good feedback, and I think that it's an example of transformational leadership because we did blah, 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 blah. Okay, so make sure that you're linking that in there. A lot of people tend to use follow-on sentences, particularly with the word however in the middle. So check your sentences when you're proofing your assignment before you submit it, if you've got the luxury of that time, and I hope you would make that sort of time, to see whether or not you've got two ideas in a sentence joined together with the word however in the middle. Some people also don't use subheadings. I find that everyone covers off on all of the ideas when you've got subheadings in your assignment, and I'd urge you to use them so that you can sort out the different parts of your essay. Some people also have incomplete paragraphs, and this is a really common problem because in workplace environments, they're not really too fussed on how you do paragraphing, but it's really important that you're using 5 or more sentences in academic writing. So make sure that you go through and you check for 1 to 2 sentence paragraphs and you fix it so that that's not the case. A lot of people miss out on linking and transition sentences in their paragraphs. If you want to know more about that, have a look at the resources on how to write an essay that I've got up on the Milo site for you. These sentences are pretty important because they provide your argument and your vertical thread in your essay so that your reader can follow it. Some people have too many quotes. They don't feel confident enough to use their own words, so they use heaps of quotes from different sources. Make sure that you're avoiding that. The key to showing that you understand the ideas is paraphrasing the ideas of other people. And then, of course, referencing them. And some people didn't have clear referencing, or they didn't cite the literature in the correct manner. For instance, not using page numbers for quotes and so forth. I thought I'd very quickly step you through the marking rubric. So you can see that there's three main areas of content. It's articulating the differences between leadership and management. And in the high distinction box, we've got a detailed discussion of the specific differences between leadership and management. Not just a broad discussion, which is more a credit, of differences, similarities, or at least one or the other, that doesn't have detail. So that would be sort of lumping it all into a bunch of paragraphs and just describing what's going on, rather than specifically organising your paragraphs around certain themes in theories of leadership and management. We've also got applying theoretical and practical knowledge about ethical leadership to analyse your own leadership practices. And you can see that I've worded this in terms of detailed applications of specific elements of two leadership theories to analyse your own police leadership practices in terms of ethical leadership. So it's really thinking about what that term ethical means and how you can incorporate that into your discussion. And from there, it's mostly looking at structure and communication. So we've got addressing the set task, where you're actually focusing on the set task. You're writing an essay, not a literature review on leadership and management. Using appropriate expression and so forth. You've got clear introduction, conclusion. Your major points are very clear in the way that you've structured it, and you've got very fluent writing and spelling, grammar, all of that sort of stuff, and clear paragraphs. And then we've got attributing the work of others, which is focused on referencing, and it clearly gives you an indication of how many references to use. Some very brief information about how to structure an essay. Now, this is more a reminder because we have got information up on the Milo site for you about how to do that. So I'm not going to go through that for you, but just a reminder that you need an introduction, the body, which has the different sections, and paragraphs which make up those sections, and a conclusion of your essay where you're summarising your ideas. I always like to give examples of assessments that we've done previously and to use example paragraphs from those assessments so that you can see the type of language that is expected. Some people write at a higher level than others, and this particular example was a very high achiever, but nonetheless it gives you a sense of how to structure those paragraphs. So this person's talking about the topic overall of the challenge for organisations in balancing management and leadership, and then they use different research literature to elaborate those points a bit better. So you can see up the top we've got our point, right, and then we've got our evidence and elaboration of that point, so elaboration in a sentence in addition to the topic sentence at the top. Then we've got our evidence, which is coming from the research literature, and they've got a very short quote in there. And then we've got our point of relevance at the bottom, which links back to your topic sentence or your major point in your paragraph, which is also a linking sentence. It stands to reason that if senior executive of an organisation is not open to new ideas, then progressive concepts will not prevail. So that's linking more or less to your original point. So it's point, elaboration, evidence, linking, which is actually appeal. It's pretty easy and straightforward. We've got an example of a sort of more reflective paragraph, and you can see how they've linked in the research literature there in Harrison, but they talk in a bit of detail about how that unfolded and what happened, again linking back to the overall point at the end of their paragraph. I've given you an example of an introduction where they've got a couple of introductory sentences. Then I've actually incorporated research literature into this introduction, which is not necessary, but you can actually do that. And then there's a nice roadmap of what the person will do overall in the response. So by comparing leadership and management, this document will seek to understand the differences, similarities, blah, blah, blah. No intent to evaluate, but then the document will go on to review two examples of personally experienced leadership styles. It will close by detailing, so we can see that it's going to go through a section about differences and similarities, a section about the personal reflectance stuff, and then it's going to conclude. It's really, really straightforward. It's nice and clear. And then we've got a conclusion that talks about summarising the main ideas, and then so what for the future, I suppose. So that just gives you some examples of the writing and what we'd expect to see in the writing overall. Again, just remembering that's a very high bar. We're not expecting perfection in an essay. It's just whatever you're aiming to. But it gives you a sense of the type of language at least and how to put it together in fully developed paragraphs. That's pretty much it from me. I hope that was helpful for you. And if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Have a great day. See you later.